To make the enemies able to die, this is where we need to provide a method for the enemy so that the enemy is not existing anymore. So the enemy is going to, well, it had health, it also is going to now need to track its state on whether it's alive or dead, because then we're going to be able to use that when we're working through the game, because we want to only update and display and check for collisions and do all that with enemies that aren't dead. So the first thing that we want to do is go into our enemy class here, and we're going to give them a property, because we don't have kind of in between states. You're either alive or you're not. It's a Boolean. So now if you want, you could use alive instead of dead if you like a positive value. That's just who you are. So right now we'll say we're not dead yet. And then we want to give them a method. I'll just put it up here just so I don't have to scroll down so far on it. And this method will be, we are able to tell them how to die. Because what we want to try and do while we're working on this is, it's a good practice to, ideally we don't set their properties, because even in our combat, what would be nice is we then have a update health method inside our player and our enemy, and we just pass to that the value, but we're trying to keep it somewhat simple here and not have to pass too many values back and forth. But now in our combat, so if we fight here, so when the enemy has been affected, this is where now what we need to do is, now we need to do some work inside the fight that's going to help us figure out what is going on. So if our current enemy, its health is less than or equal to 0, meaning they shouldn't be alive anymore. So when that is the case, then we will say our enemy, so our current enemy, we tell it to die. And then what I would like to do is I would like to update a score by 1. Now we don't have a global score yet for our project, so let's go and put one in. So we'll just add here, it's lowercase I int score. When we start out our game, our score will be equal to 0. And now in our game, here we go. Now instead of score 0 like that, we do score plus score. Now if I want a space between those, I can just put a little gap on it, so it spaces that out. So after the colon, a space, and then I have my variable score, so we can show that score that happens. So after we take out an enemy and then update the score, well, we could check to see if we've won, but first let's just go game state is equal to, and just set it to game. Eventually we're going to wrap this into an if, so if we've killed all the enemies we win, otherwise we'll just go back and play the game. So let's test and see what's happening. Let's hope I win. And the enemy is still there. The enemy is still there because inside our game loop here, we're displaying all of them. But what we only want to do is we only want to update and test and do things for enemies that aren't dead. So we go if enemy's eye dead is equal to false. Now I could use not, the not sign as part of it, and go not dead here. Let's auto format that so we can see how now it sets it up. Let's do it again. Alright, and now the enemy's gone, and we can see our score went up by 1. Now, I don't really like the size or position of that, so let's go in the game here. I'm going to want to say, if you're resetting values left, center, right for your text, it's not a bad practice to get in the habit of resetting that. Now I know I want my left to be 32 because this is 64, so halfway over that. I think that's going to be a decent amount, and I want to make this a little bit bigger, so I'll go 36. Now let's test that, and I like that a lot better. So we're in good shape now. The next part is to work on win and lose, and then we'll set it up with multiple enemies and figure out when we intersect how to set the current. Oh, we already do have that. We can set the current enemy. So technically, let's just delete that now. We'll start out in our game mode. Now, when you're doing a lot of testing, sometimes you turn off wall collisions. Oh, forgot to go though in game mode. When we intersect with that, this is where we need to go. Game state equals combat. So if you find wandering the maze with all the wall collisions on, if you want to speed it up, you just comment those lines out. Okay, we're there. Oh wow, I'm really losing. So technically I should have lost this fight, but apparently I have cheat mode on, which allowed me to do it. Perfect. Okay, scores up, that's there. So we don't have lose and win worked into it, but the rest of it is working. Adding in our win and lose functionality to our game is now where we want to go, because currently we can intersect, but we need to make something happen. So while we are working in our combat, we add to the score, and what we want to do is change our game state to win if we've killed all the enemies. Otherwise, we go back to game state of game and return to the game. So we need to do a couple of different things here. We need to extend out our game state loop here. So else if game state equal to win, else if game state is equal to lose. So we've set those up. Now we'll create two new methods, play win and play lose. Of course, they're underlined red right now because we haven't created those yet. So we need to create those different states to be part of our game. To do that, I'm just going to create a new tab here. I'll just call this win lose, and with this we'll create our two methods, play win, and win and lose are going to be pretty much the same. So I'll set a color for the background. And again, wander over into the color picker and choose colors that are appropriate, or even better, load graphics in your background and make it look more interesting. But right now I'm just going to keep it basic. You have all the knowledge you need to be able to load an image in the background, so you could use a background image instead of just a plain color. Now I'm going to set my fill color to white. Text align will be center. And we'll do a text size, we'll make it really big here. And with this, we'll say winner. And we'll just center it. Width divided by 2, height divided by 2. And we need a comma right there. That's why it's red. Alright. So that starts out. We don't have any way to replay our game yet, but first let's just get our win and lose working. So let's copy that. Paste it in, and now we will have play lose. And with this, game over. I emphasize that we have lost. Let's go grab a different color here. So we now have play win and play lose. We've instituted those into our draw loop. So this is our state system that maintains the state that we have. And now what we need to do is integrate that into our actual combat as we set that up. So after we've updated the score, so our enemies are able to die, we've updated our score, well, we want to find out and say if score is greater than or equal to the number of enemies that we have in our game, then we want to set our game state equal to win. Close curly, else. So we really have two options here. It's either we have eliminated all the enemies, or we've returned to the game after we've taken out a current enemy. So we're able to take care of that. Just put a comment here, and this will be player wins. Here. Well, it's not really player wins because it's success. Now let's go put in our player failure. So the player failure is going to allow us to navigate our game state to a lose situation. So we go if the player's health, so we ask about the player's health, and if it is now less than or equal to 0, at that point it's a pretty simple option here, and we just simply say game state is now equal to lose. That's it. So if our health goes all the way down, we lose. If our health does not and we take out the enemy, right now we have one enemy, so let's try this out. Still have wall collisions on, so that limits a little bit. Okay, now we can attack. Oh, this isn't boding well. Game over, so we lost. Alright, let's try again. Oh, lost again. Now, sometimes what you can do while you're testing your game is you can bring in kind of a cheat code. Okay, winner. Alright, so we have winner, game over, so we've proven that they both work. But otherwise, you can just modify the combat of how much the player or enemy has when they attack so that you make it end faster if you don't want to keep trying and trying and trying to make it happen. Now, the real test is going to be if I have 2 enemies. Let's find out here now when we have 2 enemies. And I'm going to modify the combat here so the player is more likely to be super successful in vanquishing the foes. Okay, score went up by 1. I did notice one thing that is happening when we are in the game. It shows our score here under play game, but I think somewhere, right, I thought I saw lowercase s. Notice though the lines go away, the no stroke, so we might want to just eliminate stroke right away at the beginning. Alright, but we got rid of 1 very successfully, so now we got rid of 2. So we've proven that the game works whether we have 1 enemy or 2. So that is a good situation that we've been able to work into the game. So we can play the game, we can win the game, we can lose the game, we have multiple enemies. It's kind of all there. The only final step that we need to work into it is how to be able to reset the game when we're done and have won or lost if we want to play again. So before we work into the reset on this, one thing that I'm going to put into the game is we'll just simply say no stroke. Now if I had a start screen, maybe I'd want to put that even in the setup. So let's see how it looks. No stroke, okay, that's good. I also I'm going to eliminate the little visual boxes that indicate where the active area is for the enemy and for the player, so we just see their artwork. And remember we had the little center dot as well, that tiny little 1 pixel by 1 pixel bug that we just drew in the center of each one. So now let's look at it, and that looks a lot better. We have our characters, they're moving as part of this. Alright, the player is still OP, so we do need to scale and figure that out. But now we've cleaned up the game a little bit. But what we really need to figure out is a reset. So on win and lose, after we've done that, we need to reset the game. So reset the game really is going to be about repopulating our game world with the enemies, repositioning the player to a starting location, resetting the score, resetting everybody's health. So there's a couple of ways we could do it. Because our game has a pretty low number of resources, we could just repopulate the array with fresh enemies. That would be a simple solution. The enemies themselves could then figure out, we could use, let's see, where's our method of the random enemy start? So we could use this to figure out where to position the enemies and reset them so we reuse the same enemies, so that's a possibility as well. So that's another option that we could employ on this project. So like in any endeavor, there's a number of methods that we can use, because we can see when we create it, we just create the new enemies with that. So we could repopulate the array, essentially just looping through this, through the array as part of a reset. Or we can create a value that resets everything. So let's set up that function. And then this function, we will then draw a button on each of the win and lose screens that we're able to use as a reset button. And then that button will call this method. So it makes more sense to draw that button and then just call this method versus having all these instructions repeated. So with the player on here, so the player has a bunch of starting values. So currently it starts in the middle of the game board, and its health is at 300. So what we can do with the player is the player can have its own reset method that we just call for the player. So with that, we can just copy paste a few of these values. So put that in, copy the health, put that in. So now that resets the position of the player and resets its health back to its value. So now when we go over here, we can go player.reset. So we can have the function, the name is occurring twice. We have our game reset, but then the individual object can have its own reset method. So they're called the same thing, but they do different items. We can reset our score back to 0. So now it's been reset to 0. And what we can do to figure out where to put the enemies, really the easiest way is just to loop through that enemy array and replace the enemies that are there with new ones. Now, if we had a really large game with thousands and thousands of assets, we probably don't want to create new objects to replace existing objects. That seems like a waste, and we would then just want to call a reset method. So there's different ways of doing things. So no matter what, we have to loop through our array of enemies, and however many there are, now this creates a new one. Or what we can do is we can use a variant of this function and build a reset method the same way we did for the players. So we could do it this way, but I think it's going to be cleaner to follow the route we did on the player. So we'll just create a reset method here on it, and we need to set a couple of different things. We need to reset their position. We want to do it into a random position. So we know that we passed in, when we construct these, we pass in that random start position. So I'm going to just make a temporary variable here, or a local variable. We have an integer, it's an array. This will be our new position, so new pos. And that will be create, all right, I gotta just go look at the name on it. It is create random enemy start. So let's just copy that, grab it over here, paste that in, create random enemy start. All right, so now what we can do is copy in essence, what we've done up here. So we have this, but instead of using pos, we'll use our new position there. So we'll just kind of copy this, paste that in, and just reuse this and y, and then this, our y value is passed in first, that's why it's 0, 1, and this will be our h, and this is now our new pos, or new position. So that creates the new position for it. Now we also need to reset our health. So we set our health back to 300, and finally, we're no longer dead. Because if we're dead, when we look at the game, if enemies are dead, we don't display them or do anything else with them. So it's important that we fix that. So our reset repositions the enemy, updates our health, and says we're no longer dead. Now wandering back into our win-lose here, now what I can do instead is just go dot reset like this. So I think that that's just a little bit cleaner. And it also keeps our code more encapsulated, which is good, so that the reset method, the enemy wants to know about it. The rest of our game code really shouldn't care. It shouldn't really know. I mean, it's easier to just leave it clean like that. So we've reset the player, we've reset our score, we've reset the enemies, and finally, we need to reset our game state. Well, not win. Game. Alright, now I forgot I just have some mouse press in here that I was noodling around and forgot to get rid of those, so we will put those in correctly on it when we create our button. So right now it's pretty much a guaranteed win. So we'll leave this in here, go mouse pressed reset, and our mouse X is less than half the height. Now, whoop, don't need that. Now the reason I'm doing that is the attack button is down here, so I'm clicking that button. I want when I'm at the win state just to click in the top half just to make that happen. Alright, so let's test this and see how it's working. Okay, I'm not sure, but I think I actually ended up with both ghosts on the same square that last time. Alright. So we have to remember that the player is totally overpowered at the moment. Just this allows us to do our testing. And now click down here, nothing, click up here. We can see the game resets. They reset to a new location. They're coming after me. So it's working. So that's good. So what we do want to have happen in our win and lose screen is we want to create a reset button. But we want to make sure that button is not where that is. So when I look at combat, let's figure out where that button is. So that button, that rectangle is here. So we could reuse all of this and simply modify the values of both the colors as well as the position of it. So we can draw that button, and then we'll have to do our checking to see if we are intersecting it. So what I want to do with this is figure out, okay, so this draws the main body of the button, and the button is 180 wide, so that's 90 minus 320. So now if I want it centered, we're really looking at a 230 value. The text will be, again, like that. And we're going to have to play a little magic here to figure out where we want things to appear. So currently the button is 70 tall, so if I were to put it at, say, 400, now the fill color, that will show in both backgrounds. That purple color is not going to, so I'm going to just find a different color for that, and I'm going to just choose something that's very different in both backgrounds. We'll just choose that. So it's 250, 91, 184. So that now adds that in. So now this needs to be over 10, so it's 240. And then if that's at 400, it needs to now be at 410. So this text here, when we put this in, I don't want it to be, that's our left value, so we don't want that at 410, but instead we're going to be looking closer to 250. Text line is centered, so So this is really going to be so if we're centering it 230 plus 90, 310. Actually, it should be 320. We'll see where it lands and then adjust appropriately. And finally, the Y value, so we can see the inner rectangle is the top at 410, and it's 50 wide, so that's 460. So let's try 450. Let's just give that a test, and to speed things up, let's just go win. And it puts it in there. We do have a stroke going on because we didn't start. So I'm going to go inside my setup here. And we're just going to add it in so it's there. Let's try again. All right, no stroke. So that worked pretty close. I'm going to go grab the combat button once more. Just want to make sure that they're not overlapping, because if they are overlapping, then we will run into problems when, if you're clicking on the attack button, it registers. So we can see attacks down there, again is here. I think I want to move it up though. So I didn't pre-build these buttons to know values that I wanted to put in. So this is why we're doing some kind of figuring, but I want to get it closer to winner. I mean, the size of everything, that works. General positioning is not bad, but we need to pull that Y up, and I'm just going to pull it up 50. So that'd be 350 off of there, and then this would be 360, and then this would be 400. Let's try that again. All right, that's better. That gets us closer. So the other buttons down here, again, is here. That works out really well for us. And now we just need to do the same kind of button magic like what we had here. So we just have all of those values on it. So if we press the mouse, and mouse X is going to be, and we're going to need that on its own line because this is going to get really long with it. So if mouse X is, we'll start out less than, well, let's just go with greater than first. So if mouse X is greater than, let's see, the left edge of the button is going to be at 230. And a mouse X is less than the right edge of our button, so that's 230 plus 180, or 230 plus the width of it, that's 180, so then that's 300, that's 410. And our mouse Y is going to be, the top is at, so as long as we're greater than 350, but we want to be less than, so our mouse Y has to be above, so 350 and then 70, so then that is 420. So when all of those are met, it will reset the game. Let's test it. I can click, 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 click. Now if I go right here, click, the game reset. Perfect. And knowing that, I can just go grab this code here. And let's go and put that into our lose screen as well. So now we have a win screen, we have a lose screen. They both have buttons. Let's go verify. We'll set our game state here to lose. So let's see how that turns out. There it is. Click the button and it worked. And since the game should be playable, let's play. We're still OP, so we should be able to destroy these ghosts quite handily. Ooh. And we won. Reset, scores reset, ghosts are there. So I can now just keep playing the game. So really, what we need to do to improve this is under combat, work out what is the appropriate value. So maybe, if we're both equal value, both at 100, so theoretically you could take it out in 3 to 4 hits, depending on what you draw. But they could do the same to you. But now if I have something like 10 enemies, that's going to be a lot more difficult as we work through this. So now if let's run this and see. Oh, that's right, we start in game over. All right, so attack. Oh, well, that's bad. I forgot, since we're equal, I'm not doing so hot. Yeah, this is bad. Yep, we lost. So if I have 10 enemies, we probably, under combat, don't want to be equal, so maybe I want to be more overpowered. I still want to have that ability to lose, but maybe they take off 50. Now we have to change it, so we start with game. Okay. So, and if you don't like that flashing, remember, where it's flashing every time we attack, just to give a little bit of visual that something is happening. And we lost. So 10 enemies, it's probably not going to be our best option. Just going to reset our game state so we don't start as a loser. Start with game. And again, if you want to make a start screen, well, a start screen would probably look just like our win screens and lose screens, so we could put that in. And you could have a start screen and begin on that. Maybe put some directions, make it a fancy graphic. You just, maybe instead of, you click a button and then you can play the game. But you need to balance out how to do the combat and make all of that work. But we're well on our way to creating a nicely featured game that has some fun playability worked into it. Good luck and have fun.